The movie kicks off with a heartwarming scene. Steve Morgan, a loving husband and dedicated doctor, is making tea for his wife, Allison. As he hands her the cup, he playfully asks why she ever decided to marry him, lightening her mood. While chatting, he notices she's low on her AFib medication and gently reminds her to let him know in advance so he can refill it. He emphasizes the importance of taking her condition seriously. Allison then joins Steve in the kitchen and suggests they visit their ranch since it's been ages. Steve agrees, setting the plan for Friday. Hesitant but determined, Allison brings up a sensitive topic. They haven't discussed having a baby in a while. She mentions her friend Janet, which makes Steve realize Janet might have planted some doubts about modern medicine in her mind. Steve reassures Allison and promises to talk more about it during their trip to the ranch before heading off to his clinic. Later, Allison meets up with her friends, Cynthia and Janet. Cynthia complains about a man building more houses in their neighborhood, causing traffic problems. Allison quickly suggests they keep the contractor busy with paperwork and start a petition, impressing Cynthia, who wonders if Allison has studied law. During their chat, Steve calls Allison, asking her to be home when he arrives. As she talks to him, Cynthia asks Janet about Allison's condition and learns she has amnesia, remembering things for only a year. After saying goodbye to her friends, Allison drives home but gets distracted by a mother and her baby. This momentary distraction leads to a terrible accident, landing Allison in the hospital. Steve rushes to her side and speaks with Dr. Prasad, who informs him that Allison has a mild concussion that will take a few days to heal. Steve is deeply concerned but relieved it's not more serious. When it comes to paperwork, Steve firmly declines involving insurance companies but agrees to provide Allison's medical history. Later that night, Allison wakes up terrified from a dream about a little girl in a house. Steve, thinking her head might be hurting from the concussion, comforts her. A few days later, Dr. Prasad visits and is pleased to see Allison up and about, her sense of humor back. He prescribes some painkillers, but Steve steps in, informing Allison they've already checked out of the hospital. Before they leave, Prasad offers some final advice and departs. On the drive home, Allison longs for a warm bath, and Steve promises to make dinner. As they pass by, Allison spots Janet and asks Steve to stop. After a brief chat with Janet, Steve, being overprotective, insists on taking Allison home. As they drive, Allison sees a house and gets sudden flashes of a tattooed man and the little girl from her dream. That evening, after her bath, Allison joins Steve in the kitchen to ask about dinner. As Steve pours milk, Allison suddenly feels dizzy and sees flashes of someone following her to her car and a milk bottle smashing to the ground. Once she regains her senses, Steve gently asks what's happening. Allison describes visions of a girl resembling her and a tattooed man. She suggests they might be memories. Steve reassures her, reminding her of her painful past with an abusive father and ex-boyfriend, attributing the visions to the concussion. Later, Allison sneaks out of bed and stands in front of a mirror. This time, her head spins again, and she sees herself wearing a ring, pregnant. She spots a cradle and starts down the stairs, but the vision ends as the tattooed man opens a door. Disturbed, Allison is comforted by Steve when he arrives. The next day, Allison is hanging out with her friends when Cynthia leaves, thanking her for the petition idea. After she's gone, Allison spots a little girl playing in the park and is hit with visions of herself playing with the same girl from her dreams. Janet notices something is off and convinces Allison to open up. Allison explains the flashes and the pain they cause. Janet is surprised to learn Steve knows nothing about this and suggests Allison get a second opinion. In the following scene, Allison visits Dr. Prasad and shares her visions. Prasad thinks Allison might be lucky, assuming her memories could be returning. When asked about her medications, Allison mentions she's taking amiodarone for her AFib. Prasad is concerned and says she'll need to see Allison's AFib records but promises not to tell Steve. She advises Allison to see a cardiologist to clear things up. Later, Steve asks why Allison didn't answer his calls and finds her lost in thought. When he gets her attention, Allison questions him about the fire incident where he found her. Steve reminds her they agreed not to discuss her painful past, but Allison insists she has the right to know. Steve, not wanting to hurt her, reassures her with, "I love you more than anything." That night, Steve tries to get close, but Allison stops him, saying she'll be back to herself soon. The next day, she searches online for information about the fire that killed her family but finds nothing. As she tries to learn more about amnesia, her internet connection cuts out. She contacts her internet provider and receives a call from Dr. Prasad, who asks her to come in with her amiodarone. When Allison visits Prasad, she's shown her brain scans, revealing a lesion. Prasad assures her she's fine except for the concussion and finds no evidence of AFib. After checking Allison's blood work, Prasad finds something troubling in her toxicology report that can't be explained by amiodarone alone. She asks Allison if she's taking any other medication, but Allison says no. Prasad then asks Allison to leave her medications with her and not to worry, suggesting there might be a mistake. Allison, filled with worry, barely stops her car in time to avoid hitting a little girl. She rushes out to help, but before the girl's mother arrives, Allison is hit with another flashback of herself helping the little girl from her dreams. The girl's mother arrives, making Allison leave. Back home, Allison breaks down in tears, but Janet soon arrives to comfort her. Allison shares everything with Janet, including her suspicions about Steve lying to her. Janet asks if Steve knows about her concerns, but Allison wants to clear her doubts before confronting him. Just then, a techie from the internet service arrives, and Janet leaves, needing to get to the bank before it closes. The techie finds no issues with the hardware and tells Allison, who then receives a call from Steve reminding her about their Friday trip to the ranch. Distracted, Allison asks to talk later. The techie checks her computer and discovers a keystroke logger, used for monitoring searches and keystrokes. Allison is alarmed and asks him to remove it. Dr. Prasad then calls Allison with shocking news. The drugs she has been taking are risperidone, used to treat paranoid schizophrenia, and in precise doses, can erase memories. That evening, Steve comes home and is surprised to find Allison not ready for his friend's party. She refuses to go and angrily demands to know what he's been doing to her memories. Steve, emotional, decides to reveal the truth. He pulls out a box and tells Allison they used to live in their own modest home, not a fancy one. Her parents lived with them, and Allison realizes her father wasn't abusive. Steve tells her about her obsession with the bathtub, where she would light candles. One day, the house caught fire. Allison asks if she started the fire, but Steve shows her the belongings of their daughter, Becky. Becky was a 5-year-old girl who idolized her mother. One tragic day, while Allison and Steve were at a party, Becky took a bath surrounded by candles, and a fire broke out. Her parents died trying to save her. Steve reveals that Allison blamed herself for the tragedy and became an empty shell, her mind erasing memories to cope. She even believed she married her high school sweetheart. Psychiatrists diagnosed Allison with schizophrenia and wanted to institutionalize her, but Steve decided to take matters into his own hands. He explains how he injected medication into her memory center and used drugs to block her painful memories. Allison is shattered by this revelation and leaves, telling Steve to stay away from her. The next day, Allison shows up at Steve's clinic, determined to learn everything about her past. Steve tells her he has patients to see and asks for her help. While assisting him, Allison finds an email revealing the location of a secret storage locker. She goes to the location and uses their wedding anniversary date to unlock it. As she examines the documents inside, Steve arrives, claiming he brought her there. He tries to explain his actions, but Allison, distraught, demands he return her memories and leaves. Allison then visits Kruger Investigations and meets Jack Kruger, a private detective. She hires him to dig into her and Steve's past. Meanwhile, Dr. Prasad is shocked to find Steve waiting in her car. He drives back to his office, noticing someone tailing him. Simultaneously, Allison meets Janet, who offers her support as Allison doesn't want to be near Steve. At his office, Steve notices Kruger watching him and contacts parking authorities to get information on him. After identifying Kruger as the detective who handled Janet's divorce, Steve pays him $10,000, asking for a favor to vouch for him as a solid citizen. Kruger meets a friend in CSI, who gets Steve's fingerprints and assures him they can track him anywhere in the country. As the investigation ramps up, Steve heads home while Janet reads the shocking news of Dr. Prasad's death and immediately calls Allison. Hearing this, Allison starts packing her things, anxious to get away. Meanwhile, CSI and Kruger dig deeper and discover that Steve's real name is Troy Lancaster, who supposedly died in a car accident along with Anna, now known as Allison. As Allison prepares to leave, Steve arrives and tries to stop her, pleading with her to understand his actions and professing his love. Allison refuses to listen. In desperation, Steve calls her by her real name, Anna. Hearing this, Allison is hit with a flashback of visiting Troy and his growing obsession with her. She remembers her kidnapping vividly, but before she can react, Troy knocks her out again. Kruger tries to contact Anna but fails, prompting him to instruct CSI to alert the FBI about Troy. When Kruger reaches Anna's house, he finds Janet there. Together, they break in but find the house empty. Kruger tells Janet about Troy's real identity, and Janet reveals that Steve, now Troy, planned to visit the ranch. At the ranch, Anna wakes up horrified to see the medicines and machines Troy used to erase her memories. When Troy returns, he reminisces about how obedient and loving she used to be, then drugs her again. As he tries to kiss her, Anna resists, showing that his control over her is breaking. Enraged, Troy knocks her out again. Kruger and Janet arrive at the ranch, parking their truck in the woods. Kruger wants to go alone, but Janet insists on joining him, determined to help her friend. They spy on the ranch and spot Anna alone. Kruger instructs Janet to keep an eye on Troy while he goes to rescue Anna. Anna sees Troy working and realizes he could easily spot her and Kruger. As Kruger approaches, the tension builds. He signals to Janet, who keeps a vigilant eye on Troy. Meanwhile, Anna, regaining some of her strength, begins to devise a plan to escape. With no other options left, Anna uses her flashlight to draw Troy's attention. He sees the light and spots Janet trying to escape. He catches up to her and knocks her out, then sees Kruger and Anna attempting to flee. Realizing Troy is inside, Kruger tells Anna to wait while he confronts him. Kruger and Troy engage in a brutal fight, but Troy gains the upper hand. Using a hook, he weakens Kruger and ultimately kills him with his own shotgun. Meanwhile, Anna hides and spots a pitchfork nearby. As Troy approaches to finish her off, she grabs the pitchfork and stabs him in the chest, killing him. The next scene shows the FBI arriving at the scene. An officer approaches Anna and Janet, showing his badge and a picture of Anna with her family. In the final scene, Anna returns to her real home and is overcome with emotion as she reunites with her husband, Greg, and their daughter. The movie ends on this heartfelt note, with Anna finally back where she belongs.